Love her. You have a lot of experience with the Secret Service, don't you? Jan used to yell at them all the time, right? Mike, she's watching you. Well, we are very lucky to have these distinguished gentlemen on board the stage here at the Cherry Blossom Festival. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let them go down the line and introduce themselves real quick. I also have thank you, Dr. Larry Cook, for joining us on stage as a subject matter expert, as well as our First Lady's man, Andy Oak. So thank those two guys for coming up on stage and also being able to add into our wonderful panel. But I am going to start, and by the way, everyone knows Paul Landis, right? Yes. We love Paul. He's a cherry blossom fester now. Paul can't talk. His voice is gone. So he's going to do his best. I think it's muted. Yeah. I'll help him tell his story, and he'll do his best.
Test.
Okay. Guys, these mics, you have to talk right into them, just like that. Okay? But I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We're going to just go right down the line. Tell us who you are, what's the first and last administration. That does not pertain to my first guest right here, because he's still active Secret Service.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Swangler. I'm the Deputy Assistant Director at the Secret Service currently. I started in the Marine Corps in 1986, and I flew with HMX, the Presidential Helicopter Squadron, with President Reagan and Bush 41. I joined the Secret Service after my Marine Corps time in 1997 during the President Clinton administration. I worked in multiple field offices. I was on the President's detail twice with Bush 43, as well as President Biden, and I was on the Vice President's detail twice with Vice President Biden and Vice President Harris, and I was also spent 2 years with my favorite person, Jan, as President Carter's special agent in charge, and I'm happy to be here.
And I've probably fed you a sandwich or two on board the airplane. I probably gave him a sandwich or two on board the airplane. Tom Wells.
Hi, I'm Tom Wells. Thank you for all you people here, because my first time here, but it's been a wonderful experience for me. At any rate, my career spanned 50 years in enforcement. Began with Coast Guard and maritime law enforcement, which caused me to be interested in federal law enforcement. I went from there to the university, my degree, and then was commissioned in the Secret Service. I was the first agent commissioned in the Secret Service from Florida State University. From there, I was sworn in Jacksonville. My first office was Oklahoma City. From there, I went to Miami. During that period of time, I was back and forth into Palm Beach because President Kennedy was the nominee and before he was inaugurated. I later transitioned from Miami to the White House, first on the White House, what we called that those days, the White House detail. From there, I didn't know it, but the First Lady was, I was there while she was observing whether she would accept me as being on the children's detail. I guess I got that because I had two children, a boy and a girl about the same age as her children. So anyway, then I was on the family detail, or the kiddies detail, we called it, some of the kids. There were 5 of us between the First Lady, one of the men on the panel here, and then I was there through the assassination. That assassination, I was at the White House with the children. Some things took place that day, but then from there we stayed with them until Miss Kennedy and the children transitioned to New York. At that time, that was later the next year, and we turned that operation over to our New York field office. From there, I went back to President Johnson at the White House, and from Johnson, after he was elected, I transitioned to the Vice President's office. I was later a supervisor there, went back to the field as an agent in charge of an office, came back to Washington as an inspector, was there at the headquarters for 5 years, doing some very interesting work. And from there went to Birmingham, Alabama as the agent in charge of the Birmingham field office. After that, I retired. That was in 1981. I was through 7 presidents, beginning with Eisenhower and ended in Reagan.
7 presidents. Thank you, Tom. Denny, tell us who you are. Who was your first and who was your last administration?
Before I do that, I want to say that this is how we're all supposed to look. Yeah, and he's a big boss. He can't do anything for me anymore, but I mean that. My name is Denny Schleinwein. Of this bunch, I'm the least most significant, probably you would say, which is probably a good thing. I'm a former school teacher. I was a school teacher in Illinois for 3 years. In fact, I was at a Catholic high school, Catholic high school I was at when I discovered Kennedy had been assassinated. But I made $5,500 a year there and decided to move to Florida. My wife didn't like the winters, so I transitioned and improved my life by teaching high school down there, making $6,600 a year. And met the right people down there. Politics played a little part, and I was hired by the Secret Service in 1976 in the Miami office, and I was making $13,000 a year, and my wife was very happy. But anyway, I have the least distinguished, you would say, career of the bunch, in so much as I wasn't on a presidential detail permanently, but I did serve 6 presidents. One statistic I like to throw out there that means something is I did $33,500 of protection, as does every Secret Service agent, but most of them don't know that. So I had a lot of fun. I was able to serve candidates for president or vice president in 1984, 88, 92, 96, and 2000. And that was just luck of the draw that I was able to be picked for that. I finished my career in 2001. I'll throw this out. I finished my career with George W. Bush. Who was running for president, as you're well aware. I was on his detail in 2000, and I remember walking him to the cabin door there at the ranch, and I said, Governor, before I leave, I want to let you know I have been with 5 people that have run for president of the United States. And he said, really? And I said, and they've all lost. and I was able to come back with him one more time after that. I was lucky enough, and he walked up to me and he said, I won this one for you, big boy. But I did add that, and I have to add this. I don't know if I put that in my book, but I said to him, in that case, is there any chance, since I'm retiring in a few months, that you could make that mention in your inauguration address? Ain't gonna happen.
Never happened.
Anyway, I retired. After I retired, I taught for 15 more years. Instead of getting other creamy, expensive jobs somewhere else, I was went back to teaching high school for coaching for 15 years, and I have a beautiful granddaughter that's here with me today that was my right-hand person, and I'm married for 56 years, and I have another 2 grandchildren.
Well, congratulations. Thank you for being here. Mike will agree with me. Service is service, whether you serve 4 days or 40 years. Service is service, so thank you for your service. So this guy right here, you want to give him, he's got a mic. You can attempt to do it, but he joined the Secret Service and was in the Secret Service for a few years. His first president was Eisenhower. So tell us who you are. Can you do it? We know who you are, Paul Landis.
I'm Paul Landis.
Okay, Paul Landis is an amazing, really American hero. And really just a part of the American history and the Secret Service history, certainly. He wrote an amazing book called The Final Witness, and it's out there for you. And his stories are just incredible. We heard him for the first time last year in over 50 years. Most people will take something and they run with it for their lives. Now, here's the difference between historical facts and that of what we see on television or read in books or anything sensational. Somebody who waited over 50 years to tell their story. Not doing it for money, not doing it for fame, could care less about any of that stuff. Doing it solely because he read a book, he saw a book, and he thought, wow, this book is pretty good. There's some pretty good facts. This guy's kind of getting it right. And then he saw a picture in the book that was a picture of a bullet. And the bullet was described inaccurately. And that led him to wanting to tell his story. So what I will challenge all of you with is, I tend to believe the people that were there. You know, I tend to believe the people that were there that saw it. So Paul, did I get that right?
Close enough.
He, so he's noted for finding the bullet at Parkland Hospital after getting the First Lady and the President out of the limousine. He found the bullet behind Mrs. Kennedy, where Mrs. Kennedy was seated, and brought the bullet in, put the bullet in his pocket because he knew it was a piece of evidence that needed to be collected and, most importantly, needed to be gone to the right place. When he went into Trauma Room 1, where the President lay on his left-hand side, he was standing right next to the President's foot. He knew that if he took the bullet out and put it there, that it would be collected as evidence as part of the President's evidence and what had happened to him. So he put it there, and there was such a sigh of relief in his body that was released that moment that he set a bullet down. That bullet eventually would make its way from Trauma Room 1 to Trauma Room 2, where Trauma Room 3, he shook his head.
I don't know what happened to the boy.
Well, it eventually ended up sort of gone and never to be seen again. And it was attributed to Governor Conley, right? That bullet, it was mentioned in the book about Governor Conley? No? Gosh,
They claimed it.
They claimed it, yes, they claimed it. So, but again, you know, we believe history, and again, his book is amazing, so it'll tell the story through his eyes. So I like to give time for questions because I know that you all have questions. But I want to first refer to our presidential expert. Larry, can you tell us, because I think this is going to be really interesting, where and when the Secret Service was actually established?
Yeah, ironically, it was the last official act that Lincoln did on April 14th, 1865. Before going to Ford's Theater, he signed the legislation to establish the Secret Service. And that sounds a little more dramatic than it is, I guess, because the Secret Service was established to fight counterfeit. There was about a third of our currency that was being counterfeited at that time. And they said, we got to stop this. So they established the Secret Service, but ironically, he signed that just before going to Ford's Theater.
So it wasn't established because of the assassination that night, but ironically, it was established that day, but just for a different purpose, because there was such a problem with the counterfeiting back then.
Yeah, the protective part of it didn't really come in till 1901, after 1901, when McKinley was assassinated.
So when McKinley was assassinated, were the First Ladies already assigned, we're going to go to Andrew, were the First Ladies assigned a detail in 1900, in the early 1900s?
No, the First Ladies really, which is part of my books and what I'm talking about and getting these First Ladies out into the public and the recognition that they deserve, is that they were really cast aside for a long time, and they didn't even get a pension until Garfield.
So who was the first
Garfield
First Lady
was the
to get a
First Lady to
detail?
get a pension. The first Lady to get detail, I'm not exactly sure who would be the First Lady to have Secret Service detail. I know it is now part of that, and it was led up to after the pension and when they started to get included in these benefits of the president, but keeping in mind that this is not an elected official, not a paid official, with no job description. So they've really had to work their way into being included in these benefits of a president, and in more modern times, of course, we protect them and the family, as has been indicated.
And in the realms of our government, the First Lady position is really, it's more of a position. It's not an official position, in the sense that you know, there's offices assigned. She gets a staff and all of that, but it's not like the presidency or the vice presidency.
Well, and also, Richard, there's no legal obligation for a First Lady to do this. And oftentimes, the most recently that we've had would be Wilson in 1913, after his first wife died and his daughter Margaret filled in. But there is no legal obligation for the wife of a president to become First Lady. It was more frequent in the 1800s because of age or health issues that a female family member would stand in.
Thomas?
In addition to
Microphone.
In addition to the fact she is the First Lady, in recent years, the whole concept's changed about her role with the president. But the threat situation is what enters into the demand for security for the First Lady. And that's the primary, in addition to the nation's recognition of her position.
Mike, when you come into the Secret Service, big shoes to fill, right?
100%. One of the things that we try and teach our new agents and officers when we mint the new ones that come on training, we teach them our tradecraft as well as our culture. And our culture was established right here. We have a very, very rich history since 1865, and we relish every bit of that history. And these gentlemen are part of the reasons I'm standing here. I'm sitting here, and I hope I'm part of the reason that some of the young folks out here will join us as well. It's one of the most awesome jobs on the planet, and it's a humbling experience being very close to these presidents and first ladies and children, and just being a witness. I tell the students, you don't become a witness of history, you become a part of it. You play a role in that history. You're standing in the room when things are happening that we won't hear on CNN for weeks sometimes, if ever.
Paul describes it as the greatest job ever, and he was so happy to have that job. And you know, it's in a moment, it can change, and we know it changed on November 22nd, 1963. But before you talk about President Kennedy's assassination, how many assassination attempts and successful assassinations have we had over history?
Well, we've had 11 of our presidents have significant deadly attempts on their lives. Unfortunately, 4 of them turned into an assassination. But to put that in perspective, for 11 of our presidents to have significant attempts on their lives, that's almost 25% of our total presidents from George Washington on up. It's like 24.4%, something like that.
And the first one, let's talk about the first one real quick.
Yeah, the first one, well, the would-be assassin picked the wrong guy to try to assassinate because he went after Andrew Jackson. And so Andrew Jackson this was 1835, and Jackson had been in the Capitol to attend a funeral of a congressman or a senator that had passed away. And as he came out of the Capitol, a guy by the name of Richard Lawrence was really mentally unstable. He thought that Jackson doing the banking system was going to take away his money that he was going to get from the King of England. You know, it was that type of thing. And so anyway, he sees Jackson coming. He pulls a pistol out of his waistband, and this is the cap and ball time where the cap has to fire, and then the ball comes out, and he fires. There's a bang from the cap, but no ball comes out. So Jackson sees this and proceeds to rush toward the guy, which I assume would not be recommended these days. And so he rushes toward the guy, and when he gets like point blank range now, the guy pulls almost an identical pistol out of his waistband, shoots Jackson with it, and the same exact thing happens. No projectile comes out, so Jackson proceeds to beat the guy with his cane.
Amazing. Mike, tell us, what kind of made you want to be a Secret Service agent?
Oh, well, I was in the 7th grade when President Reagan was shot, and I remember that very vividly. And I've always kind of said, wow, that's really cool what they're doing. It's a call to service, just like many of you have when you go in the Army or the Navy or the Marine Corps. So it's a call to service, just like
I'm sorry, you didn't say Air Force.
Air Force, Space Force. Sorry, we have Space Force now. Or you put together things like these great events. So it's a call to service for that. And I will just add that, I had 2 children, and they were about this high when I first introduced them to President George W. Bush when I was at the White House the first time. And now I'm the first active agent to have 2 children on the job at the same time. Both of my sons are agents right now.
Next year.
Yeah.
Let's get them here. They can be festers.
Yeah, my oldest son is on the president's detail, and my youngest son is in New York City, and he's a polygrapher. He runs the polygraph program.
So Agent Jerry Parr pushed President Reagan into the limousine outside of the Washington Hilton Hotel with the assassination attempt. Didn't you also have to push somebody into? Tell us about that real quick.
Which one are we talking about? Yeah, well, I not long ago, several months ago, at the end of the Biden administration, we were in Wilmington, and there was a drunk person that crashed into the police cars a block away from where we were literally walking out, and everybody stopped. There was a huge bang, and then all I heard was tire screeching and people yelling, and it's time to You don't want to put your hands on the president, and you have to answer for that, but sometimes you do. And that's what we do. And that's why we need proximity. Yeah. We have to trust, they have to trust us, we have to trust them. They need to know that we're there. We have personal relationships with them, but they know we have to be professional when we do. And you become very close, especially the 2 years that I was with President Carter and with President Biden and all the others. You establish a relationship, but they know there's a time when you turn that on and when you turn that off. But sometimes you have to do what you got to do, and there's no time to think about it. And that's why I guess every one of these gentlemen up here will tell you that they rely on their training. When push comes to shove, we rely on what we train, and we train all the time for those kinds of things.
And literally, sometimes push comes to shove. Yeah, Jerry Parr tells a story about, jumping onto Reagan in the back of the limo, and the president said, geez, Jerry, you broke my rib. I think you broke my rib. And it was only then and there that Jerry saw the blood coming out of the president's mouth and rerouted the vehicle to get to the hospital versus back to the White House. So, Thomas?
Just to add on Jerry Parr, he was one of my shift agents in the vice president's detail earlier, and he was a great guy. But I wanted the thing about Jerry was, and the training and what have you. Normally, when the bell rings, so to speak, the evacuation, we move the principal to a secure location, which is always predetermined wherever we are at any time. In that case, it would be back to the White House. So that was the initial start from the hotel. Had Jerry not, through his training and known what he was seeing, when he saw that little foam in the mouth coming out the side, he knew exactly he had a lung shot, and he knew that if we didn't go to the hospital, if he had taken the president back to the White House, the president would have been dead. The president was so far gone when he got to the hospital that they had to lift him onto the gurney. He couldn't stay on his feet.
And he gets on the gurney and he looks up at all the doctors and he says, what does he say?
I hope you're Republicans.
I hope you're Republicans. and the doctor's reply was, Mr. President, today we all are Republicans. All right, I know you have questions. So go ahead. Yeah.
What I'd like to say is a real general thing. Mike mentioned, future agents. You don't have to be in law enforcement to become a Secret Service agent. The beautiful thing about that job was, I was a school teacher, is that we have the best fraternity/sorority in law enforcement ever created. FBI agents train their accountants, their lawyers, whatever, and that's it. Secret Service agents run the gamut. All you need to have, basically you should have a college degree, but it chooses people from every single walk of life and brings us all together. For me, for 25 years, I had more great friends. It is the healthiest organization you could ever want, and there's so many great things. And let me just say a couple other things. I was often asked, you were never on a detail? And I said, not officially. And they said, well, did you ever save the president's life? And my answer is real simple. I hope so. Every single time we're with any of the people we protect, who knows if I did. The only life I ever saved was on the job. I saved a 3-year-old in a fire. And I got the Valor Award. Isn't that something? But the point I'm trying to make is that there isn't, and other than being a shortstop for the Chicago Cubs, there couldn't ever be a better job. For 25 years, I was allowed to see so many great people from all walks of life and work with the greatest people that you could, in law enforcement, you could possibly imagine. And so for that, I'm forever thankful.
Mike, how right does Hollywood get the portrayal of Secret Service agents?
They don't.
I know.
They don't. We tell everybody it's hours and hours of boredom surrounded by moments of insanity, and you have to be ready for that one moment of insanity when it happens. Like you said, when the bell rings, you have to answer it. And when anybody says to any of us, you would really jump in front of a bullet for that person, it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican. We rely on our training. And the answer I always give them is, we don't have a choice. It's what we do. When we hear shots fire, we run towards the problem. And that's the way we train. We train like that every single day. And I see it. I still see it. I'm so encouraged. The reason why I'm still a Secret Service agent after 28 years is I love every single day of what I do.
I actually got in trouble on a movie set once because I played a Secret Service agent in The Sentinel with Michael Douglas and Kiefer Sutherland. And we were waiting around for them to do the shot. And all the guys are, they want to look good on film, so they're all like this and all buttoned up. And I went around, I was like, hey, unbutton your jacket. And they're like, what? And the wardrobe department came over, and she goes, why are you telling them to unbutton their? I'm like, 'cause you ever see a secret agent with their jacket unbuttoned or buttoned? And she's like, I don't know. So they kind of ushered me off set, but it was a little bit. I know. And I was actually supposed to be there. Most of the time, I'm on movie sets and I'm not supposed to be there. Those who know me know. Okay, Jordan.
Funny moments with presidents or interaction on the job? Any funny moments?
I've got one. I got a good one. Before I forget, too, I've written a book, too, and it's out there, and I mentioned that because my
I'm going to give you a shameless plug. You don't think I know my job?
Okay, thank you. So I was with Geraldine Ferraro, which was really cool. She's the first female, as you realize, to ever run for major office. So right off the bat, she didn't know my name, but she knew I was an agent. We were at San Diego State University, and she was shaking hands with all these kids in the outside. And as she did that, I went up to her, and she was shaking hands, and I came up behind her, and I grabbed her belt. And as I grabbed her belt, she was doing this. And she did that, and we got done, and we went backstage, and she said, agent, she didn't know my name then, stop with the loosey-goosey stuff. And I said, Miss Ferraro, like in a concert, can you imagine what would happen to us if one of these students grabbed her and pulled her into the crowd and surfed her? So for the rest of the time we were with her, for the whole campaign, she would get on stage and she'd go.
All right, use your mics because the world is watching online.
Yes,
They got to hear us. Questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's on. One quick question. So if you imagine a detail with a president, say, or someone, one of the questions I had was, how much authority does the Secret Service have to control what's going on? I mean, do you have to make judgment calls if a president suddenly wants to do something that seems, and then you have
You mean
to
with
say,
the president himself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you obligated to do what he says, or can you
Some
say
presidents, some presidents obviously don't realize who we think we are, but thank you. But I can recall. So the president doesn't have a choice. We have to be with him. Now, can we tell the president no? We absolutely can if it's a security reason. We try and convince first the staff, this is not a good idea, we shouldn't do this. But I actually went in the Oval Office with George W. Bush once with our SAC, because I was doing the advance for the Daytona 500. And he wanted to get in the car and do the whole lap around. And we said, listen, sir, we can't do that. He said, well, I want to do that. And he said, well, if you want to do that, we're going to have to sweep the entire state, the entire station. It's going to take this much manpower, this many mags. It's going to put the public out for hours standing out there at magnetometers. So we talk to their protectees and tell them why we don't believe it's a good idea for security, but we can't tell them yes or no, they can't go anywhere unless it's a war zone, unless it's something for security. And we do that. We have conversations with them all the time.
So that race that he was at, they gave him that helmet with the flag, the American flag, and the eagle on it. When he got on the airplane, he put it on and he went like that. It was fun.
I can add to that, Richard. I can add
Go
to
ahead.
the funny. I don't know if it's funny, but interesting. When the revolution happened down in the Dominican Republic several years ago, further back than some of you people are old enough to know about. But anyway, President Johnson declared it a communist uprising. And then there was a lot of pushback from the press, so he sent the FBI down to prove his point. So the next thing is they have a ceasefire, and the vice president's going down. So we go down, and we're still in the hot zone. There's a ceasefire, but there's a lot of firefights going on, Molotov cocktails and what have you. And so we're briefing the vice president about what we're going to be the next day, where he's going to be, where the problems are, what we've got in the car for him to do, and what he's got to do. After we get through with this briefing this night, the night before all the activity is going to take place, he looks at us and he says, fellas, he said, I'm going to tell you, I have been, I've received instructions on quite a few of our operations. But he said, I'm going to tell you, this is the first time I've ever heard an assassination briefed.
All right, so I heard that Eleanor Roosevelt refused Secret Service because she thought she could take care of herself. Yeah. So in that vein, have you had experiences with either presidents or their family members who were just like, no, leave me alone, I don't want Secret Service, or they didn't want to be bothered, they didn't want them around them because they thought they could take care of themselves?
Nixon, right? Nixon turned away after a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He thought it was a waste of taxpayer.
I know, because I knocked on his door in Jersey. My friend told me, hey, President Nixon doesn't have Secret Service. It was a long drive where you could just walk up. And so I knocked on the door. The maid answered the door. And I said, hi, can I get the president to sign my book? And she slammed the door in. And I was like, yeah. So I looked at my friend. I was like, oh, we're in trouble. And
Test.
yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, and sure enough, the door opened, and there stood President Nixon, and he said, hi, boys, what do you need? He signed our book for us. It was great. It was really
and Richard,
good.
as far as Eleanor Roosevelt, that's true. And she had quite a discussion with the Secret Service, and what they came to was an agreement that Eleanor Roosevelt would get a license to carry and a pistol to carry in her purse, which she did. And when she died, they found her purse with a bunch of sentimental things, some personal notes, some cards of friends, and some verses and poetry and things like that, but also her license to carry. And I promise you, it's on display at the FDR Museum up in Hyde Park. And it looks like my grandmother on a picture with a little hat and everything with her license to carry.
Larry, who was the first president to have a code name? Does anyone know? Mike, anybody? Code name?
Yeah, like Reagan was Rawhide.
Rawhide.
And then First Lady.
Carter was Deacon,
Deacon,
of course, and his wife was Dancer. But the neat
Kennedy
one
was what? Microphone.
Kennedy was Lancer, First Lady was Lace, Caroline was Lyric, and John was Lark.
I was saying that Carter was Deacon. His wife was Dancer. The most appropriate one was, the one I spent with too, was Amy. She was Dynamite.
Richard?
Yes, sir.
Interesting, Dancer. I was Dancer in the Kennedy administration, so Dancer was used more than once.
Yeah.
So Dynamite in the classroom. Was she? Was Amy Carter Dynamite in the classroom?
Our agents.
Only to her agents. And what was that like, there with the agents with...
It was marvelous to have two good-looking men in your classroom. And,
Dan was the teacher, by the way.
I was never having a problem with discipline ever more in my life because I had briefed them about the agents and that they were there to protect. It was just a challenge to let Amy have a natural life. But then when Mike came on the detail, he's sitting in the church sanctuary, and I just speak to him nicely. Come to find out, he was going to be our new agent in Plains. He had come to scope me out.
I did.
To see how
That's
I
true.
ran all the things we had to go through in Plains.
Yes.
And I just thought, oh my goodness, what is he going to be like? I'm going to have to train him too.
Yeah. And she did. I went up to Jan. I was going to tell the story. I went up to Jan, and she said, hey, listen, here's what happens. You bring the president in, you do this. I will tell everybody where they seat, where they can sit. I will tell them how to take the picture. I'm going to grab the picture. I'll move the line. You just stand. And I was like, okay. And I was like, who is this lady? And then it turns out she was the best agent we had in Plains, Georgia.
And you must have did a pretty good job, because when I called Mike, I said, hi, I'm a friend of Jan and George. And he said, well, then you're my friend, because I'm...
And Mike, one of the agents told me that I would make a marvelous agent, but I was too dangerous to carry a gun.
Okay, we're going to bring it down just a second, and we're not, just a hair. Let's talk November 22nd, 1963. Multi-stop, multi-leg trip, bouncing around Texas for campaign purposes. Thomas, where were you on November 22nd, 1963?
That morning, well, I was at the White House. That morning was a typical day. The weather was good. It was to be Caroline's first sleepover away from home with one of her friends. We had a grammar school at the White House, first and second grades, which Caroline attended school. There was two teachers there. It was an accredited grammar school. And one of the students there, Caroline's friend, was Agatha Posen. And she was going to Agatha's home to spend the night, since it had been prearranged with the First Lady, with the President and the First Lady being out of town. Agatha Posen's house, when we knew that house, Mr. Posen was one of the high officials in the Commerce Department, I believe. But it was in a cul-de-sac, kind of down in a bowl. And didn't present any problem as long as things were running routine. But anyway, Ms. Posen was at the White House. I think she had lunch with Maud Shaw, the governess, that day. And then she came out. The girls were in the back seat of Ms. Posen's car, and I was in the security vehicle behind. So we left the White House, and we were headed up toward Chevy Chase, where their residence was. I got a blast on the commercial radio. The shots had been fired in the vicinity of the President's in Dallas. I immediately stopped Ms. Posen, and as I went to the car, my first concern was if the girls had heard anything. Ms. Posen immediately said, "I don't think they heard anything. I heard it on the radio. I turned it off, and they were talking. I don't think they heard anything." I said, "Well, just keep alert. I may have to stop you again as things develop. I don't have any information right now." So as we moved on up towards Chevy Chase, you'll have to understand that when in those years, and I guess it's different today with technology, but the White House communications operations, which we call Crown was who we talked with on the radio amongst ourselves. When the president, when he goes to Dallas, Crown basically goes to Dallas. Everything that has to do with the communications of the president moves with him. It doesn't stay in Washington. The core unit is there, but it moves with him. So all of the action that was going on in Dallas was being handled with all the resources down there. So it was not important for them to tell us what was going on down there. So we were kind of in a little bit of a bind. And at the same time, when that happened, the telephone system in Washington collapsed, because everybody who heard them on the radio was on the phone calling somebody they knew or whatever. So the system just locked down. So there was no telephone system for some time in Washington. So in the meantime, I'm able to talk back with our agents at the White House. But we made a decision, just like any time when we have a protectee that there's a threat, to evacuate to the most secure environment. So immediately, we didn't have to wait on superiors. The people on the detail response for it, we made the decision. I stopped Ms. Posen. I told her, I said, there's been a change in plans. I'll have to take Caroline back to the White House. And she objected a little bit because she thought Caroline would be better at their house. But I told her, I said, no, once we get to your house, we're going to be known. Your neighbors are going to know. Next thing the press is know. You live in a place that we can't get out of. You're in a basin at the end of a cul-de-sac. That ain't going to happen. The decision's already been made. So I turned to Caroline, and I told Caroline, your mom's coming back home tonight, and she wants you back home. So we have to go back home. Well, she puckered up her lips a little bit. She wasn't happy, but the president and Miss Kennedy had told the children from day one that when the agents spoke to them, gave them instructions or orders, they were to accept it just as though it came from the president or their mother. So there was never any problem with that. They always addressed us, Mr. Wells, Mr. Landis, Mr. Foster, or whatever. So
like Mary Eisenhower did yesterday.
Yeah.
If you were here yesterday, she did
Yeah.
that. She called him by Mr.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so I put her in the car, headed toward the White House. I told Foster we were on the way back, and advised the other folks. in Rock Creek Parkway, about midway down, something happened that was not unusual at all. Sometimes when we'd be traveling with the children in the car, people would see them and say, "Oh, they think maybe that is a child," and so they want to keep looking to see if they can verify what they think they see. So a car I'll always remember, it was a green Studebaker sedan, he's not pulling along, not pulling upside of me, but he looks over, and I can tell he thinks he sees Caroline. So I sped up to move away from him. He never accelerated. He didn't make any change. I left him, went on back. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because the Kennedy family commissioned my rusty brain is named to write the book about the president's life. And in the interviews with him, when we were instructed to be interviewed by him, William Manchester. So in Manchester's book, there's several things he wanted, and what he thought he wanted me to say, because he thought that I would give him the answer that he wanted. He identified that as a chase, to say that there was something there beyond what went on in Dallas. And I kept telling him, no, there was no chase, and explained to him what happened. When we'd be in Palm Beach a lot of times, we'd be along, and a car on the side of us would be looking at the children and run into the car in front of them that stopped for a red light. So I knew what was happening. But anyway, we went back to the White House, came back in there, and from there on, there was...
And of course, the first lady and the former president hadn't come back till that evening.
That was 4 o'clock the next morning. Yeah, when they arrived. Yeah.
Right, back at Andrews.
Isn't that memory incredible?
It is incredible, and I know you were shaking your head when you heard Studebaker, because you're thinking a Studebaker now compared to what we do. Yeah. And Paul mentioned, the duties of a Secret Service agent then were vastly different than they are now, and there were only 400 agents in 1963, and now there's 33,000 or something, or more?
No, we wish.
No, how many?
No, the Secret Service has about 7,400.
7,400.
But that's not all agents. Okay.
No.
So we have about 3,500 agents.
3,500.
Yeah.
That's where the 35 came from. Got it. I'm sorry.
Historically, we've been about 10% of the FBI. To give you an idea, when I came in, we had basically 300 agents, and they had 3,000. And today, we're just about 10% of what they have. So it's interesting that over all these years, it stayed about 10%. But
majority
the duties
not
are
protective
responsibilities
detail, though, right? Or the majority protective detail, or...
No, but you have to, the Secret Service is well balanced between investigative and our protective missions. Because remember, we still do the counterfeiting since 1865. We do credit card fraud, computer fraud. We're written into the law for those things. So we do all of the crimes against children. We get involved in a vast array of criminal activity. And then we also have we also have protective intelligence. So every person that writes the White House or emails the White House and makes a threat or a veiled threat, or Jan gets drinking too much and she says something in a bar, we knock on Jan's door. So these are all, and it's a pattern where it's a phase. You start off in a field office, you learn our tradecraft, you learn our culture, and then you move on to the phase 2, which is protection. But you can only do protection for so long. About every 4 years, they want you to flip in and out of protection. Yeah.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I was wondering what you all thought about the attempted assassination attempt on President Trump in Pennsylvania, and did you think that was handled well or not?
Mike?
So the investigation continues, but I think what I want you all to know that what you witnessed was a bunch of heroic actions that day. You witnessed our uniform division, our counter snipers, and our agents do exactly what they're trained to do. So beyond that, I really shouldn't comment any further that. But I will tell you that the actions that our folks took that day saved many more lives that could have been lost.
I want to just add one quick thing, real quick.
Please, Denny, yeah.
Is one of the things that really makes it work in protection, especially, is the key word is to be proactive. And if there's anything they did that day. You can't be reactive. It's too late. So we're built on being proactive.
Two quick questions. When the sons and daughters of the president go on dates, I'll leave that up to you guys. And then the second one is after they leave office, the president, his wife, children, even grandchildren, how long do they have Secret Service protection? Is it like the rest of their lives?
Denny, did you have to go on any of the Ford children's dates because you were with the Ford administration?
I never had, no, and when I was with Amy, she was just 15. I went to see the same movie with her dozens of times. But my most memorable thing with her, crazy as it sounds, she wanted to go visit the White House one day when Reagan was on a trip somewhere. So I took her, she and her friend, Cricket, and she just wanted to go see the help at the White House. I thought that was harmless. So I took her to the White House, and as we left the bottom floor, after she saw the cook, she pushed the elevator the button, and I had never worked at the White House that much. And where did we go? We went to Reagan's residence at the top, at which time she and her friend bolted off and ran through the residence. But they were gone. They were on a trip somewhere. They were on a trip. Now this tells you, these guys may think they were in danger in tough situations. They weren't with Amy much. But so I was not happy with her because that was not, and there were people that saw us, there were people working in there, and I thought, my career is over. And so we went down the elevator, she saw I wasn't happy. We started out the South Grounds. She said, one more thing, Cricket, have you ever seen the swimming pool? And she said, no, and she kiddingly said, can I show it to her? And I said, yes, but don't jump in, and they both did.
Okay.
So now my career is definitely over, but then I got back at her on the way to Georgetown. They wanted to go to the mall, and I said, I'll take you to the mall, but you're going to go in with wet clothes. I'm not taking you home.
I had a question about your families. Obviously, you said you rely on your training. Your family does not have your training. So how do you comfort them and help them through the fact that you are putting yourself in harm's way?
You know, that's a great question. We concentrate a lot more than years gone by of work-life balance. And we teach our new agents and officers that your family is a part of our one big happy dysfunctional family, as I call it. Your wives, husbands, daughters, sons, grandparents, we have to keep them in open communications. There are times that I've been on travel that we couldn't tell them where we were, and that happens because of the situation. I'm sure all these gentlemen were in that same, and that's just part of the lifestyle. My wife contends that all the spouses should have to go through a class to learn what it's like to be a spouse of a Secret Service agent because of all the things that we don't prepare them for. But I think it's with any other relationship. It's communication. It's treating each other with respect, taking the time when I tell all our students, when you're not here, don't worry. The Secret Service will consume your life. We don't need your help. When you're not here, go do something else. Go do something else that's not Secret Service because it's important.
Talking about wives, real quick, talking about wives. I was with President Carter in Plains, former president. We were on the way home after scheduled duty. We didn't have cell phones back then, but by the time I got home, I received a telephone call to say, pack your bags, get back. You're leaving tonight for Andrews Air Force Base. We're heading to Egypt to Sadat's funeral, along with two other former presidents. So the great husband I wrote my wife a note. She wasn't home. I just wrote her a note and said, going to Egypt, goodbye. and my wife was not a stupid person, but she wasn't really into history too much. And I remember she said to me, she said later, I didn't know where Egypt was.
Mike, this question is for you, Mike. You said earlier you don't want to put hands on the president, but if you do, you have to answer for it. What did you mean by that?
Well, we have to, everything, if you fire your firearm, our legal will tell us there's a string tied to that bullet to wherever it goes. So we're not immune to anything. So if they told you about the story about Jerry Parr, when he pushed President Reagan in the limo, he thought he cracked his ribs. And you're gonna have to answer for that afterwards. But it turns out that he did the right thing. So some folks are not as comfortable with you putting their hands on you, and sometimes we have to put our hands wrapping around their belt if they're on a rope line, if they're near an edge of something. I've cut down. George W. Bush hates trees. Those trees on his ranch. They were what were those things? All they did was suck the water out of the ground, and he hated them. Now, Cedar. Somebody say cedar? We cut down so many cedar trees. And I remember one time, I told somebody to snap a picture of it. The detail leader was holding on to his belt. He was leaning over a cliff, holding a chainsaw with one arm. We were holding on to the detail leader. Somebody else was holding on to us. I was like, this is bad. We should not be doing like this. But it's kind of the things you do, because George W. Bush was extremely active. And if you could not run faster than him, you could not ride a bike faster than him, because he turned that into a competition.
We've got 5 more minutes left.
I think this might be for Mike. I'm not sure. It involves an anecdote I heard about President Carter, not too far in the past here. He apparently was fishing on his compound, on the little lake in his compound, and he had a mishap where he fell in and he was yanked out literally by a Secret Service agent. I don't know if that's true or not.
Sure, that's true. I mean, we've gone fishing with the former First Lady and President all the time. And Miss Rosalynn loved fishing as well, so we'd have to bait her hook and throw it in there. And you know what? I just want to tell you an interesting story about the Carters really quickly, because I'm from New Jersey. When I went down there, I was a fish out of water, and it's the people in Plains that made me feel so comfortable. The Carters made me feel loved and comfortable down there. It was really a wonderful environment, and they loved each other like it was like you wouldn't believe. When I had to tell President Carter he had to be in a hospital bed because we had to sit him up so his breathing was better, he refused. He had to be touching and holding her hand every night. It was amazing to me to watch that. So how did we resolve that? We bought 2 hospital beds so they could both be in them. But he refused. He said, "I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm going to be in bed with her, and we're going to hold hands. We're going to say our prayers and lay on that little tiny cracker of a pillow that they slept on." I never understood that, but yes.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, we got about 2 minutes left.
All right. In regards to 9/11, as I tried to listen to everybody's time of service, I don't know that any of you were actually working at that point in time. Can you give me any detail as to what was happening with President Bush during that time period?
I retired 2 months before that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. I was working on 9/11. I was at our headquarters, and I was called to take the First Lady to an undisclosed location because she was still in Washington. So I did that. The agents lifted the Vice President Cheney, and his feet never touched the ground as they took him to his evacuation spot. And then the detail leaders in the shift talked to the mill lady. There's a trifecta of things that happen with the president. There's a doctor, there's a mill aide, and there's a detail leader for the Secret Service. And the 3 of them make the decision on what happens with the president. So they talked on Air Force One. They decided President Bush wanted to come back to Washington. We would not let that happen. So we went somewhere else, and then to wait it out. We wanted to make sure, because early on in 9/11, and I will tell you, I've been in war zones, I've been all over the world, dangerous things, and I've never felt unsafe like I did on 9/11. Because we heard there was an airplane still inbound. We were hearing all this. Airplane inbound. Maybe it's coming to the White House. We heard all these other buildings had been hit, and they're not accounted for. We launched airplanes from Andrews Air Force Base. It was a horrible, horrible day. And I didn't go home. And again, I know he spoke about during the Kennedy assassination. Same thing. 9/11. Phones did not work. My wife could not get a hold of me at all, and I didn't get home till it was after midnight. It was a horrible, horrible day.
So since you guys are many times in the rooms where it happened, Hamilton fans, you're privy to information and conversations that no one else should or will hear. Do you black out? Do you not take in the information? Do you make yourself forget it? How do you deal with hearing those things or maybe not hearing those things that are said in those rooms?
Yeah, we signed non-disclosures, and I was one of the limousine drivers. In fact, there was a story here about Bush 41 this morning. Is she here? Is she still here, the author? Did she leave? She told a story about going to Rome. She's not here. Oh no. Well, I was driving limo that day, so she was telling the truth about that story. So, but in the limo is their roving Oval Office. Whatever the president, whoever he's having a conversation with in there, or the vice president, whoever he or she is having that conversation with, we're not allowed to discuss it with each other. So it is their Oval Office. We have to have that proximity. That's why I think you'll remember with the Clinton issue with the whole Monica Lewinsky thing, it went to the Supreme Court because the Senate was trying to make us testify. I mean the Secret Service, we did not want to testify. We refused to testify because we said, we have to be here. We can't be blabbing, and then all of a sudden now they don't want to be by us because we're regurgitating what they ever heard. So it went to the Supreme Court until we lost that case.
The only time that we would be forced to do that in a case would be if we had heard something that was illegal, something that was done that was illegal, then it's a whole different story. But if it's a personal issue, done, can't do it.
We are lucky, like I always say. Ladies and gentlemen, inside the Secret Service panel, Mike, Tom, Denny, and Paul Landis. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Andrew. They all have books. They have books out there. There's photos out there. Come outside and say hello, take a picture, and get something signed. No, Mike doesn't have a book. Can't write a book.